Hello, everybody. Welcome to Untethered.tv. I'm your host, Rob Woodbridge, also the founder. This is that place where we come to every week, every day, every month, however often you do come, to find out what the latest insights are from the mobile industry. The people that are building this industry, doing the stuff that we could only dream of 10 years ago. These are the guys that are building products that we didn't even think that we needed, but we are starting to understand that we do. Today, we're going to look at this disruptive power of mobile, as we always do, but around the context of news. Newspapers, media, they're all being disrupted by these little devices that we carry with us everywhere we go. And I have a company here, Scoople, that will walk us through what they're doing. We'll get a deep understanding of how they're doing it, but they're putting a game layer around the news. They're bringing news up. They're doing real-time polls, real-time opinion gathering. Is this the future of newspaper or news consumption? Is this the way that the newspapers should be doing it? Do they have a chance? Do the newspapers have a chance? And what gives Scoople the right to be in this business? Really, really good. I'm so excited about doing this. I'm going to bring in Alain right now. Alain is the co-founder and the CEO of Scoople. This is Alain Meyer. Alain, welcome to Untethered.tv. Thank you for telling us your story.
Well, thanks so much for having me. A pleasure to be here.
Let's start. Maybe I did a good job. Maybe I didn't do a good job. Let's talk about Scoople. What is your definition? How would you describe Scoople?
Well, Scoople is the place where you can go and, when you, in the context of news, you can express your opinion, you can see what your friends think, and then you can think about what's the majority, what does everybody else think? And you get that pretty quickly as you get the news. So it's really a place for you to kind of engage, find out what your friends think, find out what everybody else thinks, and sort of test your skills of what the majority will think.
So is this is you're gathering content and you're gathering opinion at the same time. You're gathering it, and then it's an app, but you can choose to use it in many different ways. You can use it just as a straight consumption app, like I just want to know what the news is, or you can actually participate deep. Talk about a little bit of the participation that you guys have built into this.
Right. So the idea is that when the best time for me to express an opinion and to kind of think about it is when I read the news right there. So we have the way the app works is that in an article, embedded in the article, in the summary that we generate are questions. And so then right at the time, let's say, give me maybe even an example. Let's say there are some rumors that the new iPhone 5 will have a bigger screen, right? So now the question is, do I want a bigger screen? Would actually a bigger phone be handy or not? So that's kind of the thought that I have when I read the article. And so then the question is, well, the question is right there. Would you like to have a would you like to have a bigger screen? And then I can sort of, next step, I can think about, well, what will the majority say, right? If I say I want a bigger screen, will I be sort of a lone voice, or will that be what all the fanboys want? Right? And so in this particular case, it turned out that it was a 60-40 split. I didn't know that necessarily myself. I'm actually not that great at predicting it myself. But in this particular case, 60% said, yeah, we want a bigger screen, 40% said no. And so it's that kind of element of, hey, I want to participate. I can then right away see what my friends think. And then once the question resolves, I can see the result. And so that's sort of a little bit of the experience that we're bringing that is sort of new, right? It's sort of a way of sort of getting my competitive juices flowing and learning what's going on in the world at the same time. I'm not necessarily building a farm that's sort of virtual and not there really, but I am sort of competing in a way that sort of relates to my interests and relates to what's going on in the world.
I love that. Good dig at the farm. This is actually productive use of your time, not so much farming or mining or sheep herding.
Or yes.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take a step back here, because you're entering a space that some of the biggest companies on the planet, media companies, are trying to figure out right now. We're talking about some of the biggest brands in this in this space. Why get into this business? What was it that put you in? Like, you're not a journalist by trade,
right?
So why do this?
Well, I am definitely very passionate about news and consuming news, and I always felt like I was doing this sort of as a solitary action. And even if I would tweet out, I mean, it's sort of a very quick thing where the next 10 minutes maybe a couple of people would see my tweet and then they would be gone from their stream of tweets. And so I felt like there is a lot more there, and it may be much more interesting to connect with others, whether they're my friends or people who have just common interests, than around many of the other topics that people connect today, whether it's travel or gaming and what have you. And so we felt that if we put the engagement first and sort of have the content as the basis, then we're sort of really turning it around from what the traditional media does, where they're trying to engage based on the content they have, right? So it's sort of the engagement in our case comes first. There's the game, and it happens to be around the news, which is obviously the interesting part. But it's not the news, and then we're kind of tried how to add something at the end.
All right. So, I mean, obviously, you guys are relatively new. You've been around since late last year, late 2011.
Yeah. That's right.
And I mean, what was it like? Was there nothing available that you saw, or I mean, was there a germ of an idea that you saw online somewhere, or an app that you thought it's close, but man, I just wish it did these three things? Is that where it started, or what was the idea? What was that germination of the idea?
Right. I mean, it wasn't an app. I mean, what we noticed was that people on Twitter would sort of do a little bit what we're doing, right? I mean, they would put an opinion forth, and they would put it, but it often would get lost, and then maybe one or two people would answer and say, "I agree" or "I disagree." But what we saw was that people want to do that, and we were not kind of tapping into something that happens naturally, but there was no real sort of structured way of doing it and sort of really getting then the data back. So it was people tried it on Twitter, sort of similarly that people, I guess, tweeted about their location before Foursquare came along. Right? They did do it, and it worked. It kind of worked, but it wasn't really a very well-structured way or a very fun way of doing it until some players like Foursquare came along. And so similarly, in our case, people were tweeting and trying to kind of communicate opinions, but it wasn't really fun or meaningful until sort of the context that we bring came along.
Okay, so you wake up. You're obviously gainfully employed. You say, listen, this is what I want to do. What's that first, like, did you have a team in mind? Was your team built already? Did you work with these guys before that are part of your team?
Yes, that's exactly what happened. The team we have are the old guys. We have known each other for many, many years, and we've worked together in different adventures. And we felt like, especially with the mobile explosion that happens, that now, that is a good time to, jump in again and start from scratch.
But so you decide on this, and is it a passion for all three of you guys?
Yeah, we're all passionate about this. Also, our advisors who are very well versed in mobile and analytics and media. Yeah, we also have got together and say, this is the time to do it.
Okay, so you jump in, and then when did you release? When was the time frame from the time that you started doing this to the time that you release a product that you feel comfortable with?
In our case, we started to late last spring, sort of drawing out the plans. We then worked very feverishly through the summer and the fall to kind of have a beta release. We actually have the way we did it. Might enjoy is that we actually released the app in Canada, just to test, make sure that we got all that nothing it kind of worked the way we wanted. And then late last, sort of around the holidays last year, we then released worldwide and went from there.
Canada's a good place to release these things because our population. I'm Canadian. I'm up in Ottawa.
Yes, that's right.
And our population is just north of the actually just north of the population of just California. So we're a good beta test place, right? So
yes,
30
exactly.
Yeah. So. All right, now you launch it. That takes some time, and are you guys close to a product that you feel comfortable with? Where would you say you are with the completedness of, if I can use that word, of this product? Are you satisfied? Is it your vision now, or is there so much more work to do?
Well, I think there is a lot more that we want to do, obviously, but I think at the same time, the product that's out there is highly useful, right? I mean, it informs you, and it allows you to express opinions and play a skill-based game that's unique, doesn't really exist sort of anywhere that we are aware of. So I think it's a very compelling product. Obviously, based on all the things we learned and based on all our ideas, there's a lot more we want to do with it, with that basic core of the idea.
All right, so. You launch, you put it out there. What's the reception been?
it's been very, very good. I mean, we sort of obviously look at the data, how our users interact with the product, and what we have seen is that we have now, our engagement is very game-like. I mean, and that may be now kind of obvious, but when we started, we didn't know if we can have a new, sort of an app where the basic content is news, but where the engagement is more like a game, right? And so if we can see now that there's a core of users, and it's a sizable core that really come in, answer questions as much as they can, and really compete on the leaderboard. And one little data point we have is that between the last and the previous version, we slightly changed how our leaderboards work, and we had a few outraged users, and it kind of shows, and we loved it. We loved it because it shows the passion that people bring to playing the game. And then the next sort of slightly bigger core around that are the people who answer questions just because of their interest, right? They don't necessarily play the game to be on number one on leaderboard, but they answer the questions because they're interested. They have a genuine interest in the particular topics, and we can see that they only answer questions on Apple, or they only answer questions on celebrity gossip or what have you. And they do that, and they pick the questions they're interested in. They probably want to see what their friends think, and the way we set it up is that only people who are, and you can only see anybody else's answer after you answer yourself. So that's we can see that there's really a drive for people to answer questions. And then we have obviously people who are sort of just consuming the results and consuming the news. But the nice thing there is that we've seen that even people, we have seen a non-trivial amount of people using the app maybe for a month or for 6 weeks and then starting to answer questions. So it's really sort of, there's really sort of the people are paying attention to the game even if they're not actively participating at first. And so I think that's really very satisfying that we sort of, succeeded in sort of taking something that has been sort of something you do either by yourself or you sort of tweet out, but now it's really sort of a really nice social experience.
I like that a lot, because one of the key challenges, is that in this space is that you touched on it a little bit before, is that there's so much news flowing through all of our channels at any given time. There are so many great resources out there that allow us to get news from somewhere, right? We're talking about
yes.
We're talking about radio, television, traditional means, newspapers, magazines, and now you throw in the tablets, the smartphones, the web, Twitter, Facebook. I'm missing 1,000 other things, and all of these are coming at us at full force. And it's very hard to stay on top of that, but it's even harder to remain committed to one source. So what have you guys done with Scoople to drive people? It's the game piece that you've built into it, but is that just to keep people coming back into the app? Was that the main strategy for people to launch this thing every single day, many times a day?
Right, that's definitely a key piece to it. And the other piece to it is that the result of people doing what they're doing, playing the game, is sort of producing interesting data again, right? So it's almost like the second wave of news, right? We have the hard news that says, Apple is planning to do X, or that the election primary in this state is won by Gingrich or Romney or what have you. But then the second phase is, what do people think about it? What is the majority? What's the sentiment about it, right? So that's in many cases just as interesting, right? I mean, and that's sort of another aspect of what we deliver is as a result of people participating and being engaged with us, we then have the sentiment of what's happening. And we can present that back as sort of the second wave of news, if you like.
Sentiment is so, it's so difficult to capture, but so important to actually relay. And that's one of the key things that I love about what you guys are doing is these real-time opinion gathering mechanisms that you've got in place. So the game aspect of this, where you've got, I'll just pull one up. You've got surveys. Here's one on the screen right now that talks about, do you think social media can change U.S. politics? Where 93% say yes, 7% no. And this was really topical around Al Gore and Sean Parker talking at South by Southwest about what this technology and this industry can do. And here's a real-time poll that based on 109 responses on March 15th, 2012. And
right.
That's the power of this thing. Forget about waiting 3 months for ComScore results. You're giving them right away.
Right. And the other interesting part, actually, I'm glad you bring that one particular poll up, because we did another one that's asked people, are you holding back when you offer political opinions, right? And the vast majority said yes. And it's sort of really interesting to see that on one hand, people are super optimistic of the social media changing everything in politics. On the other hand, when it comes to actually offer an opinion, a political opinion online, they're holding back. And so we can juxtapose these things very quickly to each other, and then actually, even write about it. Let's say a little blog and say, look, social media, that's actually on our blog, social media is very interesting, right? Everybody's super optimistic, and at the same time, people are somewhat scared to actually offer up their political opinion online. And so, again, that happens within, couple hours of these news passing through, right?
God, that's what's so amazing about this is that you really get to see the true flavors of what's going on out there. Because how often would you say that? Listen, I believe it's a stand. I believe that social and mobile will have an impact on something. We've seen it everywhere, right? We've seen governments crumble because they can't shut mobile down, right?
Right.
So now you've got that perfect juxtaposition where everybody believes, look, you know what? This stuff is powerful. It's going to change. Yes, it can change politics. Yes, it can hold people accountable. Yes, it can do all these things. But am I participating? Hell no. It's so good.
Right.
I love it. And I think that's the comfort level of these things, right? Where if you're able to draw as an application, if you're able to draw that information out of somebody in a way that makes it easy to use, you have them hooked, don't you?
Right, and that's easy to use. That's what we've been. The vast part of the summer, right, was to chip away things that aren't needed to be in the app to make it super easy. And what we ended up really was, there's two buttons, right? If the minimal amount of engagement that you need to do to be useful to us is to either click the yes button or the no button, and you can do that while you're reading the news at Starbucks or in the subway or wherever, right? And that's sort of where we were driving towards, because we had all these crazy ideas about we're going to put prediction games and odds and whatnot, and we just figured out let's just be simple. Let's make it dead simple, because that's what people will love about it.
Do you have you talk about the prediction game, because I've seen some people who have mentioned in reviews, mentioned your prediction game idea. But I want to hold off for 1 second about that, because I want to key in on something that you just said. When you were building this out, you had a grand vision of the features that would go in there. Do you have an example of something that was in there that you just said, oh, look, it's too complicated. We'll pull that out until we get a mass adoption, until people understand what this app is about?
Right. Yeah. So one of the first ideas that we had was to actually have these questions be about real predictions, right? So will that person win the primary? Will the Vancouver Canucks win the Stanley Cup or what have you? Right. But then we figured out that the
answer is no, by the way. However, the Ottawa Senators are looking okay this year to make the playoffs. I'm okay with that. So carry on. My apologies.
No worries. We figured out, that's interesting, but it would sort of slow down the initial velocity of the game, right? Because if you have to wait 3 weeks to know if you won that or not, or there might be even outcomes that aren't quite clear, then we would have to be the arbiter of an outcome. That just felt like, that's super interesting and probably very appealing to a small group of people. But in order to make this a fast-paced game that every question is interesting, we'd rather do where you predict the majority. And so that was an example where we said, let's predict the majority. The question only has to be up for can be up for a couple hours, can be up for a day or for 2 days if it's a bigger question, but it's going to create a fast-paced game versus a prediction, which is super interesting, but would slow us down initially.
And who's the arbiter of that decision? Is it a group decision that you guys do, that somebody brought the idea forward and it's you guys that decide, listen, we can't do that. There's just no way we can do that. I mean, is this a democracy, or is it really about what's best for the product? I mean, how do you decide these things, and who does that in your team?
Yeah, we tried. We have a few very smart advisors. One of them actually being the former CEO of Dig, Jay Adelson, and a couple other people like that. And we listen. We always, I have built companies in the past, and I always felt like there's a lot more smart people. The pool of smart people outside my company is always bigger than inside, and so I want to listen to these people. And so we built a pretty awesome advisory board. That's certainly helpful. And then the nice thing about being in the space we are, we can show to our families and friends and let them play and give us honest feedback. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And there's no pride in slashing something, or that doesn't matter. We all work for the success.
How did you get Jay on your board?
Through a friend.
So this is Silicon Valley connections coming through, right?
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Jay's a great guy. He has been very helpful already, and he's a great guy to bounce ideas off.
I mean, I'm really interested about this because did he ever tell you what it was about what Scoople's doing that appealed to him? Obviously, because of Dig, it's not the same realm of business around surfacing great or the most relevant news at that given point in time, right? So this seems like a natural spot for him to offer you guys some great insight.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think, right. So I think part of what's appealed to him is the piece on the opinion, right? Because I mean, the sentiment on the opinion that by just voting up a story doesn't really come through. I mean, you can vote up a story because you find it totally appalling, or you can vote up a story because you agree with it or disagree with it or what have you, right? So there is that's somewhat a different aspect to it. And the other thing I think is also that I think the lesson that sort of came out of Dig is that you have engagement, but you don't really reward the people for the engagement, right? I mean, so you're not really rewarded for the Dig experience is you just do something, but there's no explicit sort of game or explicit leaderboard or explicit sort of reward out there for your work. And so I think that's the kind of another aspect. But obviously, the times are different, and there's a number of things that you can sort of go through. But I think. And also one should not forget the fact that Dig could have been a big success if they had sold at the right time. So it's not just that it didn't work, right?
Well, we say that tongue in cheek. I mean, they're still driving many, many, many more millions of unique visitors per month than a lot of properties out there. They just had their challenges, obviously.
Absolutely.
And that's not. It's not a good or bad reflection on them. It's very interesting. I like to hear that. Alan, you bringing on people that are going to help you not make the mistakes that these guys have already made in that space and allow you to pinpoint. Right, you got a small team. How big is your team?
We're actually just 3 guys full time, and we have a number of contractors, and we also hired a few journalism students to help us. So and they're actually very excited. For them, it's really an exciting gig to work with us. So I think the group of people actively involved is maybe a dozen. But it's the core, so full-time, we're just right now at 3.
So, small team, which is very, very important here. Are you guys funded, self-funded? Are you doing this by yourself so far?
We raised an angel round.
Was it Silicon Valley angels? Or
Yes.
I love that. I want to come back to this journalism piece. I'm really interested in their take. So you're bringing on younger journalists. They're going through school right now. And do they look at this like it's disruptive or the norm?
It's an interesting question. I mean, they are definitely very excited because I think what they're looking. The way they look at us is more like this is kind of the new trend, what they call data-driven journalism, right? Which is sort of based on first of all teasing out the data from asking good questions, right? Because the questions are manually curated, so that the questions that we, at least for right now, and that's what part of the student's job is. And then the next part is to kind of find data in what's interesting about the results, what's interesting about how people think, and then as we grow, I think what we're going to focus more is actually writing a little bit our own analysis on what our data is. Today, we're a little bit constrained. We actually have already now a lot more data than we can sort of even hope to write about. But that's sort of, I think the data-driven aspect, I think, is part of what really appealing to these young young journalists.
So are they learning this kind of stuff in school, or is what you're exposing them to new to them?
I think it's new. I don't think that's what they learn. And I think it's also what we're learning at the same time, right? We think this is something new. We're sort of going through this learning experience together, and find out, what are the interesting pieces, what are questions that people will answer, right, in bigger numbers than others. What are questions that tease out, splits, or what are questions that everybody will just say yes, right? I mean, so that there's a lot of aspects to that we're just learning together.
So it's really interesting. You must, how many polls have you done? How many real-time opinions?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I actually don't know. I know that we are getting close to about 150,000 opinions rendered.
See,
in the system.
I love that. I was telling you before we actually we started filming that I sat with a prominent newspaper organization, and they're basing a lot of their decisions around a random selection of 1,000 people polled over 6 months. And they're building their business decision on those results. Let me say that again. A random poll of a random number of 1,000 people during a period of 6 months. And that's what they're building their decisions, business decisions on. So I love the real-time nature about this. And you're talking about a short period of time, 150,000 opinions, which is an incredible, incredible slice of a nation, or a city, or a province, or a state. I mean, I love that. I think it's very important.
Right. I mean, I actually, so I learned myself, like when I studied, like, so what's a Gallup poll, right? And I learned that it's about 1,000 people that are being called up and asked certain questions, and people make this. I mean, it's not just the newspaper you mentioned. I think a lot of people in the political organizations and elsewhere make decisions based on Gallup polls, right? And so what's behind it is about 1,000 people that sort of being called up, and they maybe even called up on their home phone, and these other people still have home phones and all that good stuff. So we feel like we are now living in an age where people have their phones all the time with them. They're their personal assistant, and they're always connected, and they read and they inform themselves. And at the point of when they inform themselves about what's going on, asking the questions, that's the best time. And that we can, if our growth continues, we can surpass sort of the sample size of a Gallup in pretty short time.
That's the power of this industry. You must know what kind of questions work best. Like you've distilled this down to the simplest of simple. So yes or no questions. Obviously those are the ones that work best for you in this medium for quick response.
Yes, I mean, that's definitely where we started, because we felt like, as I mentioned earlier, that we want to capture people when they are in the subway or waiting for the bus or at Starbucks or lunch or what have you. And that's our starting point. That's not to say that we can sort of make it a little richer as we go on, but it sort of fits into the sort of the same culture as if you can't ask a questions in a much longer than 140 characters, then maybe the question is so complicated that not people will answer it. So I think it's sort of, it forces our journalists and ourselves to be very succinct in what we ask, and we often arrive at a place where we have a long question, and then we figure out that we can ask it in a much shorter, simpler way, and it's just as good. And so I think that constraints almost becomes a virtue at that point.
So it's right. It's easy to write a long dissertation. It's very difficult to write a one-page summary, isn't it?
Right. Exactly. Same thing. Yeah.
Okay. So, the last thing I want to talk about was this prediction game idea. So, it seems like a logical thing that you're carrying so much in terms of analytics, right? 150,000 opinions, all these responses. What news your readers are identifying with, or what's hot, what the general consensus is around what stories are being read. talk about this prediction idea, because I think that this is an interesting thing, because when you get analytics and news together, just like economics, is that it goes in cycles, doesn't it? And do you start to see or hope to see some trends when that happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we want to do is is sort of to start being a little bit more having a little bit more method behind the madness of asking these questions, and start asking questions that actually relate to each other over time. So what we can do is right, and what we will start doing a bit more is maybe we can ask the same question in like every month and see how things change, or ask different questions or different phrases around similar topics. And so actually one of our writers, like we're just going to release it on our blog soon, wrote about 4 different questions about a particular game that came out, a huge game, and asked different aspects at different times when the news came out. And so we have a very interesting sort of composite analysis about how people feel about this huge game. And so I think that's sort of what you'll see more from us, is sort of having a little bit, figuring out how we sort of ask the questions around similar topics or same questions at different times, and see how people's answers will vary.
What about revenue? Have you thought about how you guys generate revenue to sustain yourself?
We haven't. So I don't want to speculate necessarily about what we're going to do, but I mean, I think it's safe to say that the value of what we're doing is in the data we have, and that will be what will drive revenue in the future for us.
Things like polling for businesses, or as you said earlier on in this episode, sentiment around product or sentiment around services. Yes. Those kind of things are very powerful, aren't they?
Yes, that's definitely the direction that we will go for a bit on the business side, right? I mean, we obviously we want to be very aware of the privacy issues that go with it, so we would never reveal or sell personal data of any sort of kind. But in the aggregate, which is more interesting, anyways, there's a lot of things that one can imagine. Imagine that we. A brand wants to ask a question about their product, right? And since it's a game, people will be motivated to answer that. And we can slice the data of not just demographics, but maybe AT&T wants to ask a question about somebody who has a particular opinion on Sprint, or those kind of population, right? And so there's a lot of opportunity for us to do that in the future.
What do you think? It's interesting around that business model. I mean, what do you think is a mass number? Do you have that in your head that says, listen, we have to have this many users in order to be able to turn that side of revenue on? Is there a threshold that you look at?
I don't think it's a threshold. I think we learn sort of to kind of figure out what sort of statistically significant. We already seen that a few hundred answers versus 1,000 answers actually does not necessarily change the outcome. And so I think that as I mentioned before, Gallup makes samples 1,000 people, and I have seen results in a lot of tech blogs that are in the hundreds. So I think we can do better than that. And I think as soon as we sort of reliably above that threshold, I think it starts to become interesting.
Yeah, as I said, I mean, businesses, multinational, billion-dollar businesses are making decisions based on 1,000 people sampled over 6 months. It doesn't sound like it's a stretch. I mean, when you start to see trends in data, they're trends, and you're right. Things aren't going to drastically change. But I just, I say this often when I sit down and I talk with somebody whose business is very fascinating to me, and I think fascinating to a lot of people, is that when I start getting excited about the opportunities that haven't been exploited in your business, I think that that's a good sign around the opportunities to generate revenue. You must feel that way as well.
Yes, absolutely.
How do you contain that excitement and focus it on just incremental product output as opposed to kind of the entrepreneur ADD? I know that you've had businesses before, so you know what I'm talking about. Is that you can't focus on one idea because there's always another shiny idea right next to it that you want to expand on. I mean, how do you have that discipline to do that?
Well, it comes with a little bit of experience. Once you have done it a couple times, I think it helps. And the other part of it is that I think you grow the business, you grow the company sort of at the same time as the business grows, so you don't grow ahead of yourself, and it's always when you have too many people that can do too many things that you can start to get distracted. That's not a danger with us for now, and so we want to keep it small. We could have raised more money, we could have grown faster, but we wanted to figure out the data first. How do people engage? What do they like? And how do we get them how do we make them have an enjoyable experience, and then how do we skim through the data on the back end? And so that's sort of where we're going, and we are really just scratched the surface at this point. So there's no need to really change anything.
So constrain your team size, and it'll constrain it'll hone your focus.
Yes.
Wow.
It definitely. I think that's the right thing to do. I mean, and we learned from the best, right? I think if you look at Instagram, I think there were not more than 5 people for quite a while. Similar Foursquare. They were very small until quite well into their game.
Yeah, I think that they remain small until they're forced to be big, and I think that a lot of those guys, when you talk to them, they don't mind. They liked it better when they were small.
Right. There's definitely something interesting about being small, because but you're forced to focus. You're forced to make decision quickly, because otherwise, you're not getting anywhere.
Yeah, I think that's right. And Instagram is only, I think, 16 people at the top end.
Right.
They hit 15 million users with 6 people, so It's possible.
Yeah, it is possible. It's probably even potentially even easier. Yeah.
Well, right now mobile has created this global marketplace, this global economy. So this enables entrepreneurship, and it enables this kind of growth, hyper growth that we're talking about. Because I sit, and I'm not going to ask you numbers, but I sit and I talk to entrepreneurs, and they are disappointed when they have 10,000 downloads or 1,500 downloads. And 10 years ago in a traditional software play, 100 downloads, 100 installs was like a victory. You were a success, and now we're humming and hawing over 10,000. It's pretty incredible the shift with which we've changed.
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit. Let's finish this off with a little bit of forward thinking around this industry that we call the news industry. I said at the very beginning, a lot of companies are out there struggling right now. Big companies, New York Times type of companies. In Canada, it's Post Media. It's the largest news network in Canada, over $1 billion in revenue. A lot of these companies are struggling with this very question about how do they make a transition from print, traditional news delivery into this brave digital world, especially mobile. So my question to you, Alain, is how disruptive is mobile to that business model, their old business model?
Well, I think it's there's definitely a potential of being quite disruptive, because I think the way that consumers have learned to interact with apps is different than on the web, and there's both sides to it. I think on one hand, once people open an app, they're they're less distracted, in the sense of they're not one click away from another website, right? So it's actually interesting because you capture them. If you're able to capture them, you can actually capture them quite well. But at the same time, obviously, the time that they have is potentially much shorter, because they're maybe on the subway or in line at Starbucks, and so it's, if you can capture them and engage them relatively quickly, you might actually have them, because they're not one click. They're not like one click away from anything else. But you have to do it very quickly, because the time slice, the micro. What I've heard is a sort of micro boredom is really micro, right? And it's going to be the real world will come in, and they have to exit the bus or get their coffee and pay for it and what have you. So it's a little bit of a different game, right? Where you have them actually potentially undivided attention, but you have them for a very short while. So you need to really engage them.
So I mean, if you were sitting across from an executive in one of these companies, they're talking paywalls, metered paywalls. They're talking about new distribution models. I mean, what gives you the right to be in that space, and to are you trying to show them that this is a potential? Do you look at this and say, look, this is the new news distribution model? What would you tell them?
Well, I think that obviously we have a little bit of an unfair advantage because we're not, we're not
Yes,
carrying the content and the history and everything. So
you don't have a printing press in your basement.
Say again?
You don't have a printing press in your basement.
That's right. Yeah, right. That's right. It's actually very funny. Our very first office happened to be in the San Francisco Chronicle building, so it was a printing press in the basement. It wasn't ours. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, what we're really putting we're turning around is the engagement and the game for first and foremost, and the content plays a supporting role to that, and that's sort of where we are. I think that's sort of a different situation than the people who actually create the original content. So I wouldn't be so presumptuous of sort of telling them what to do. But what we are sort of proving out is that the engagement around content, and it can be any kind of content, in our case happens to be sort of from many different places summarized. If you get the engagement right, people will stick with it, right? And so that's sort of, and the mobile engagement is potentially most likely different than what has worked on the web. Just think about commenting. How often do you really feel a drive to comment on something when you're on a mobile device versus clicking buttons, engage with friends? It has to be very, very quick. And I think that's sort of what we're after, and that's sort of, I think, you're starting to see the proof of what's working.
So where do you think that this goes? Where do you think that this industry goes? Do you think that what you're doing is a piece of somebody else's much larger business? Do you think that the future is about aggregation, content, and personalization and content and distribution the way that you're doing it? Do you think that the future is real-time sentiment, and is that where you're heading? I know it's a lot of questions there, but I'm
right. Well, I think what we're doing is a piece of the bigger media puzzle. I wouldn't say that we're a piece of traditional media. So I think that what we're offering is the piece that sort of people trying to do sort of on other type of distribution media like Twitter and Facebook, and it's really not that interesting because it doesn't have the context that we're offering, right? So I think we're building another piece of the bigger media, of the bigger sort of space that I think will be increasingly important and used because people want to get immediate reaction of what their friends think, what everybody else thinks, or want to engage in sort of a game-like fashion around the news, where that news comes from. Whether it's whether they see it on Twitter first or they see it somewhere else first, that remains to be seen. But there is an important piece that because now I'm always connected, I always have my phone with me. I feel like the news is one thing. The next thing is how everybody thinks about it, what people feel, what my friends think, and that's sort of the piece that we're filling in.
All right, I feel, Alan, that we could talk about this because for forever, and I think that this conversation is a global conversation going on around what this new. Not new media like animations and graphics, but this new media world looks like when it comes to news distribution. I think it's very fascinating. I think you're right in the thick of it, and I think that there's pieces of what you guys are doing that newspapers, media outlets around the world should be looking at, saying, okay, like simplify, right? Which is exactly what you've done. Simplify, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh,
I agree with that.
Okay, so I got my last question is you're entrenched in this. You've been playing in mobile for quite some time. You're an entrepreneur, but when you look around, aside from the business that you're in right now, what is getting you so excited? What keeps you up at night thinking, man, if I wasn't doing this, God, this is so exciting. You're in an exciting space. Everybody's kind of watching this rebuild in this space, but. I mean, what's keeping you up at night that's so exciting?
Well, I think the other thing is sort of the mobile commerce, right? I think there is so much that we're just at the very beginning of, whether it's Shopkick, I think, or other, and sort of there's what I feel sort of an interesting tension of is are the mobile devices sort of on one hand, can they be leveraged to make the physical shopping experience better? Or are they going to be most leveraged to actually get people out of the stores? right? I mean, so again, one can argue both ways, and I think it's very fascinating for me to see. While Shopkick, is going one way, and then Amazon is going, when you find an article in a store, you get a discount if you go and go on Amazon. So, which side of that equation is your phone becoming a loyalty card, or is your phone becoming sort of the thing that drives you out of the store? And I think that is sort of, I think, another very fascinating area on the mobile side.
I mean, it's amazing to think about the impact that mobile is having on our day-to-day lives, and as a retailer, it's on one hand, it's you're fearful of this, but on the other hand, you have to embrace it, and it is.
Yep.
Okay. That was a good answer. That was a good answer. I really appreciate that. So, where can people find you guys? More information about what Scoople is, maybe Scoople itself. Where can they find you?
Well, so there's two places. There's iTunes. If you search for Scoople, Scoople, you get the app, download it, and start playing. I think you'll enjoy it. We have our web presence is at www.scoople.it, where we also link to a few interesting results. We have a link to our blog that will become much more. Have a lot more of the results there if you want to subscribe to our blog. So I think these are places to start.
I'm just pulling it up right now, and I'll pull up the blog as well as we're talking here, because not only it's a very interesting place to subscribe to, but even if you don't subscribe, go there and take a look at some of the polls, some of the opinions that have been gathered, because it's really insightful. And I love the idea, Alain, if you ask those same questions intermittently throughout the entire year, and then graph the change that happens as a result. The popular opinion changes, and it changes in such a it can inverse itself pretty quickly, and I think that's pretty cool.
Yep.
Your poll there, which we had up on the screen here, which said, do you think the iPhone 5 needs a bigger screen than the current one? I'm going to pull that up right now, just as we finish off here, because it says 60% say yes, 40% say no. My feeling is that as we get closer to a launch next year for the iPhone 5, you are going to see a drastic shift in that. It's going to be like 99% yes, 1% no, and you'll be able to reference that a year from now to talk about, hey, look, popular opinion does shift, and it shifts pretty dramatically.
Yep.
I love it. Listen, go to scoople.it, scoople.it.
Actually, you need the www.
Yeah, you need the www in front of that.
Sorry.
Go to www.scoople.it. There's a link somewhere in here. If you're on Untether.tv, just click on it. Go to the App Store to download it. I've got it. It's a great app. Start participating. Start sharing your opinion with this application. I think that this is a piece of that future that we're talking about, where where our voice counts. Our voice is going to be heard, and it's going to be with Alain's company.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Alain, thank you. I really appreciate your time. We've been speaking with Alain Meyer, who is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Scoople. Go visit their website. Go download their application. You folks who come here, watch this or listen to this, wherever you are. You could be in the gym. You could be in the grocery store. You could be at home. Doesn't matter. I really appreciate the fact that you do this each and every time. It means a lot to us. We really, really appreciate the growth that we've seen over the last year. It's because of folks like you. If we are doing our job, you guys have found some value in this, and I know you did, because Alain is a seasoned guy, and this is an interesting space and lots of lessons to be learned here. Reach out to me, untether@gmail.com. I'll respond. If you have an idea, if you have a company, let's get them on here. Let's get some profile for this industry, for those innovators. Get some big announcements that are coming up in the next little while. Thank you guys for watching. Alain, thank you for participating. We'll see you next time on Untether.tv. See you, Alain. Thank you.
Thanks.